In a world where Godzilla just keeps getting bigger and bigger, the latest entry from Toho Studios, Godzilla Minus One, takes the opposite approach, giving us a more personal encounter with a Godzilla very close in scale to the 1954 Gojira. So let's examine the true size of the current King of the Monsters by comparing him to other versions of the Big G, various monsters from Toho, Legendary, and beyond, along with a few famous landmarks for good measure. His official height was released before the film, and near the end of the video, we'll take a look at another measurement that is definitely a huge spoiler point if you haven't seen the movie. At his tallest, he stands at 50.1 meters or just under 164.5 feet tall, only 0.1 meters or almost 4 inches taller than both of the Showa era's Godzillas and the plant-based Phileas. However, the two Showa Kings weigh in at 20,000 metric tons, with Minus Goji weighing 20,000 tons, which converts to just over 18,143 metric tons, making Minus One close to the Showa versions, while Phileas may be the same height, but it's much lighter at only 10,000 metric tons. Godzilla Jr. is in the same class, and at 40 meters or just over 131 feet tall, he would look up to Minus Goji and is a bit lighter at 15,000 metric tons. Millennium Kings like Godzilla 2000, the Kiryu Saga Gs, along with the iteration from Versus Megaguirus, are all a bit taller at 55 meters or just over 180 feet tall, and they all have an added 6,857 metric tons of bulk to throw back at our new G. The next two competitors that are still in the same range are Shin's third form, now standing upright at 57 meters or 187 feet tall, though its weight is unknown, and GMK's Goji, who was menacing at 60 meters or 197 feet, and had a sizable weight advantage at 30,000 metric tons. The Heisei era's champion has a huge advantage over Minus Goji at 80 meters or 262 feet and 50,000 metric tons, more than double its weight, and he would later grow up to 100 meters or 328 feet tall, just shy of 2 times the size of Minus One, while also bulking up to 60,000 metric tons. The Final Wars take is another 100-meter beast, though it's a bit leaner than its Heisei counterpart at 55,000 metric tons, and it would be the Monsterverse version that would finally break the 100-meter mark by 8.2 meters, or nearly 27 feet, with a weight of almost 81,647 metric tons. However, 2 years later, Toho Shin Godzilla would retake the crown in its fourth form, where it had evolved into a towering 118.5 meter or 389 feet and 92,000 metric tons. Even so, Legendary's G would continue to grow, attaining a height of 119.8 meters or 393 feet tall, closing in on that 400-foot mark, and almost catching Shin in weight at just under 90,387 metric tons. But that was when Toho said enough and gave us Godzilla Earth, a colossal plant beast standing at 300 plus meters or more than 984 feet tall, 6 times larger than Minus One, though it's important to remember that like Phileas, it's plant-based and only weighs 100,000 metric tons, just over 5.5 times heavier than Minus Goji. For other kaiju, the Showa era is a great place to start because its Godzillas were of a similar size and they ruled the era. You have other 50-meter kaiju like Jet Jaguar, a robot with a 6,857 metric ton advantage, King Caesar, the Protector who's 11,857 metric tons heavier than our Godzilla, and Mechagodzilla, whose space titanium construction pushes him up to an impressive 40,000 metric tons. There's also Megalon at 55 meters or just over 180 feet tall, whose armored exterior has a weight equal to Mecha G's. Getting to the 60-meter and above threats, you have Hedorah, the Smog Monster, who in its perfect form is 60 meters or just under 197 feet tall, and is the heaviest in the Showa Godzilla series at a massive 48,000 metric tons. Titanosaurus is another 60-meter monster, but a lot of that is neck, so he's only 30,000 metric tons. Even larger is Gigan at 65 meters or just over 213 feet tall, though he may be a bit more manageable at 25,000 metric tons. And then there's King Ghidorah, a 3-headed terror at 100 meters tall, yet it only weighs 30,000 metric tons. The kaiju from the Heisei era were enormous, so Minus One would be severely outsized by powerhouses like Space Godzilla and Destoroyah. who both stood at 120 meters and weighed 80,000 metric tons, over twice the height and nearly 4.5 times his weight. And then you have Biollante, who is imposing at 85 meters in her flower beast form and overwhelming at 120 meters in her plant beast form. And she isn't a lightweight like her fellow plant-based kaiju Earth Amphileus, weighing 60,000 to 100,000 metric tons as the flower beast, and 200,000 metric tons as the plant beast. That's 5.5 -1 for the flower form, and just over 11 of them for the plant form. Nothing outside of Space Godzilla's flying form is heavier than Biollante in the era, yet even she looks up to Mecha King Ghidorah, a three-headed space dragon that after its modification is still standing at 150 meters or just over 492 feet tall, but now with its added metal additions is 5,000 metric tons heavier, crushing the scales at 80,000 metric tons. Even so, there is a Ghidorah for every Godzilla. So let's look to Cretaceous Ghidorah, a lesser seen iteration from the Rebirth of Mothra series. It begins at 40 meters and 25,000 metric tons, a perfect size for Minus Goji, though its second stage, Grand King Ghidorah, may be a bit out of reach, with it now standing at 60 meters and more than double its weight at 50,000 metric tons. A Minus Goji in the Millennium era would have to face off with threats like Orga and Kiryu, 60-meter behemoths that weigh 45,000 and 40,000 metric tons respectively, yet it does offer a pretty good matchup when set against the unrealized Yamato no Orochi, or King Ghidorah from GMK, who stood at 50 meters and only holds a 6,857 metric ton advantage. But then we get to Final Wars, where the standing kaiju are all at least twice as tall as Minus Goji, with King Caesar now at 100 meters and 50,000 metric tons, Gigan at 120 meters and 60,000 metric tons, and Hedorah also at 120 meters, yet heavier at 70,000 metric tons. But then you get to the film's heavy hitters with Monster X at 120 meters, 60,000 metric tons, and its second form, Kaiser Ghidorah, at nearly 3 times as tall as Minus Goji at 140 meters and over 5.5 times its weight at 100,000 metric tons. If we wanted to pit Minus Goji against King Kong or have him fight alongside one, the version that fought Godzilla in the Showa era, who stood defiantly at 45 meters or close to 150 feet tall and weighed 20,500 metric tons, is a near perfect match. While Legendary's Kong in the 70s on Skull Island was a bit smaller at only 31.6 meters or 104 feet tall, with a weight of just over 143 metric tons, yet he would grow to a massive 103 meters or 337 feet for Godzilla vs. Kong. Looking beyond Toho and Legendary for size comparisons, the Colossal Titan from Attack on Titan has a 10-meter edge at 60 meters or 197 feet, though its weight is unknown. From Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, we have the various Dragonzord forms, with the standard one measuring at 38 meters or 125 feet, its battle mode, which is now 43 meters or 141 feet, and the Mega Dragonzord, topping out at 58.2 meters or 191 feet tall. Unfortunately though, they are all paperweights when compared to Minus Goji, weighing in at 154, 508, and 671 metric tons respectively. The Pacific Rim universe is in a similar situation where its Jaegers and Kaiju are tall enough, in fact most of them are quite imposing, standing in the 80-meter range. However, Jaegers like Gypsy Danger and the newer Gypsy Avenger are only around a tenth of the weight of Minus Goji, with even the larger Kaiju of the franchise like Mega Kaiju only weighing around 7,100 metric tons. To get a sense of scale from the natural world, there's the Arc de Triomphe at 49 meters or 161 feet, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa at 56.4 meters or just over 185 feet tall. And then we have the Kaiju Magnet, the Tokyo Tower, which is 6.5 times its size at a colossal 333 meters or 1,093 feet tall. Which brings us to the spoiler section of the video. So if you haven't seen -1 yet, then you've been warned. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at Godzilla as he attacked Odo Island before he was exposed to the bombs. This pre-nuke form would stand at 15 meters tall or just over 49 feet. Unfortunately, at the time of making this video, its weight is unknown, so we'll focus on height for the remaining comparisons. Beginning with the creature's inspiration, the Heisei era's Godzillasaurus, who would first appear at 12 meters or just over 39 feet. Before Godzillasaurus though, there was Minilla or Minya, The young G of the Showa era, who stood at 18 meters or about 59 feet tall. He would also appear in Godzilla Final Wars, where he was 20 meters tall or almost 66 feet high. The Showa version could shrink to human size while in the dreams of Ichiro in the film All Monsters Attack, with the later version being able to do it at will. And then we have the second Heisei Godzilla that would go through a few different stages. There's Baby at 1.64 meters or 5.4 feet. The next time we see him, he's double the size of Mini-1 and now called Little Godzilla at 30 meters or 98.4 feet tall. And then he finally starts to look more like the King of the Monsters, though not quite there yet, earning the title of Godzilla Jr., where he's a respectable 40 meters or 131.2 feet tall. Jr.'s greatest challenge, Destoroyah, in its perfect form, towers over the pre-nuke G at 120 meters, but its juvenile forms are more in the range, standing between 2 to 18 meters or 6.5 to nearly 60 feet tall. A matchup that I'd love to see would be with Gorosaurus, as both of them are monsters styled off of those early dinosaur designs, though Gorosaurus does have an edge in size at 20 meters or nearly 66 feet tall. For a vs. Kong matchup with the Odo Island form, the King Kong and Mechanicong from King Kong Escapes could both work, as the two of them are only 5 meters above our pre-nuke Godzilla. From Legendary's Monsterverse, unfortunately at the time of making this video, we don't have a size for Doug, a possible precursor to their Godzilla, or on some of the monsters from the Monarch series that could be of a similar size. But we do have measurements for the Hollow Earth rock critters from GVK. We have a slight edge on -1 at 16 meters or 52.5 feet tall, along with Skull Island super species like the Skull Crawlers, who range from 12 to 95 feet tall or 3 to 29 meters. The Radosaurus, the creature that inspired Godzilla from the beast of 20,000 fathoms, is just a bit smaller at 40 feet or 12 meters tall. While another black and white film icon, the original King Kong, who was at its largest, 7.62 meters or 25 feet tall, is less than half the height of our latest Toho G. And my robotic go-tos, the Mechagodzillas, are all too big for any comparisons to the pre-nuke version, but he does size up well with the AT-AT, or all-terrain armored transports from Star Wars, marching in at 20 meters or 66 feet tall. Or perhaps you'd rather see him do battle with the real classic Gundam of Japan, which stands above at 18 meters high. As for a famous monument in the same range as -1osaurus, you have the Hollywood sign, also at 15 meters, but for a bit of scale, there's the Statue of Liberty, which is 6.2 times his size. For even more from my How Big series, try out one of these videos, and thanks for watching.